Previously, on the last Fireside Chat mini retrospective, I began my comparison and contrast of Phoebus Day, and I will admit it kind of turned more into, how do I word this, major constructive criticism of an event long gone and arguably already corrected. I also went into some math of how many days of gym battling it would take to earn enough incubators to hatch out all your eggs for free, which may or may not have actually helped my argument. Really, in hindsight, I'm not sure if it actually did any good for my argument, but I feel like it was at least informative. But with all my criticism of Phoebus Day out of the way, I can go into how Clamperl Day improved it. So let's begin. Overall, Clamperl Research Day was a huge improvement over the previous Research Day. For one, it actually felt like an event because the response to correlate with the Research Day itself. And the research tasks were a lot more generous, so it made for a much more appealing gameplay experience for players of all demographics and skills. In comparison to the research that we've gotten during Clamperl Research Day, in comparison, we're just keeping that. In comparison to the Clamperl versus Feedbass is the word I'm looking for. There we go. The following tasks were in the game. These tasks range from making 5 nice throws, making 3 nice throws in a row, making 3 great throws, making 2 great throws in a row, and making 5 curveball throws. All these were a lot more accessible than in Feedbass Community Day, but in addition, there's also tasks that were actually themed around the event, which I personally felt that Feebas Day was severely lacking. These include catch 5 water types, catch a Magikarp or Whalmer, catch a Psyduck or Krabby. Unfortunately, if I recall correctly, one of these events had to be removed due to a bug that they had within the game. Essentially, one of them in regions that had the event early on had a game freezing bug where redeeming one of the tasks resulted in your game freezing and not being able to just reboot it up. It would still be frozen even after you're close and open up the game. Thankfully, that got patched out by removing this troublesome task when I got to other regions of the world. Unfortunately, because I procrastinated this episode for so long, I don't remember which task it was. I just remember that it was removed by the time it got to the America side of things. As for other tasks that are involved with this particular event, there was battle in the gym, use a super effective charge attack in a gym battle, and battle in a raid. All these are pretty basic. The only one that might have a bit of a cost barrier is battle in a raid. Well, that's assuming that you have no gyms nearby that have a raid battle popped up, and or you've used your free raid pass for the day. In addition, there was a few other tasks, including spin 2 Pokestops, use 3 berries to help catch Pokemon, and evolve 2 water types. Again, tasks that are very easy to do and fit the theme. And there's just overall more variety of how to get the research task this time around than there was for Phoebus Day. Especially since each one of these gave you a shot at a Clamperl. There was nothing else in the task to worry about. But in addition, they really bumped up the shiny rate for Clamperl Community Day. In fact, they did so well, I almost wonder if there was too much. But that's a whole other debate that, if we're going to get into, I'll save for a little later on. I will say, with the backlash that Phoebus Community Day got, it's pretty much essential that they had to make sure that everyone got a shiny, at least for the sake of satisfying the crowd. And plus, I'm personally not going to complain. In fact, the only downside I saw of this event was with Clamperl itself. Not necessarily because I'm complaining about whether or not the Pokemon is good, just the fact that this was one of the few Gen 3 Pokemon from the Hoenn region that have not yet been introduced into Pokemon Go. It made this event exciting no matter how relevant it was in any of the relevant metas out there. The one complaint about Clamperl though was with the evolution. How they did was Clamperl evolves into one of two Pokemon. In the main series game, that evolution would be determined by a held item that it had. And if it held that item when you traded, it would evolve in that Pokemon. However, Pokemon Go works significantly differently. And I guess they just decided to, instead of have an item for Clamperl, just make it a random evolution, which is a little bit annoying when the Clamperls are only around for a set period of time, and you keep getting Gorbis. May or may not be speaking from personal experience. But it's all good in the end. I eventually got that Huntail after I walked my Clamperl around to get a few more candies, traded some extras. And technically, the Clamperl still appeared in the wild after the event. So it wasn't a one and done deal. Although, from my personal experience, it's been pretty rare. I don't recall ever actually seeing a Clamperl in the wild. But I do know of people personally who have. So it is a thing, just not a common thing. Which, to be fair, I'm okay with, because it might have took a little bit of a less out of the event. And I get the feeling that they'll bring Clamperl back around eventually, especially if they're going to keep the spawns this low overall. Something tells me that it'll pop up in some event coming up in the future, whether it be a water event or so. But we'll just have to see how Niantic plays out their cards. Overall, regardless of the shiny rate itself, I definitely appreciate how much more accessible they made these tasks. Not necessarily easier, but accessible. Remember, this is an event that's supposed to be played by players both young and old. If you really want them to enjoy the event, you can't make things too hard. I personally would say, especially for a limited period of time. I personally think if you're going to put challenge into this game, you have to make it something that lasts long term, that people can eventually get, as long as you give them enough time to. Like in special research. And more so, I want to emphasize, it's not just the challenge of the research task between these two events that is significant, but the variety and theming of the event as well. Remember, with Phoebus Day, there's only 4 types of research. And a lot of them I honestly feel are anticlimactic, there's walking with a buddy, hatching an egg, and making a large amount of nice and great throws. I kind of wish I was able to play Phoebus Day in an area and time frame that it wasn't a snowing blizzard, so I have a bit more of a fair comparison and contraction from a personal sense. But even with that, I could tell you for sure that the Clamperl Community Day was a lot more interesting and overall fun because of the theming that they had with the event, in addition to the research task. And maybe they went a little overboard just to compensate for how the direction and overall reception of Phoebus Community Day. Cause I'll admit, I didn't even do research hunting that entire 3-hour window. I actually did a couple raids during that time window as well. And yet I got plenty of shiny Clamperls to spare. Probably did have to double check the video I uploaded, but probably about 30 tasks, give or take a few, and got about 4 shiny Clamperls out of it. But of course, no, I think it's probably more 5, because I had 3 Gorbis, and that alone took up all the candy I had. so I pretty much had to wait until I had more candy to evolve my fourth, which thankfully turned into a Huntail. Overall, I definitely see the argument of them overcompensating for the shinies, like maybe having too many shinies. But considering the situation, I understand why they would want to go for a rather too much than too little approach for this event. Always stuff that you can tweak around in future research days, right? Enter Loltad Research Day. Or, like the community has dubbed it, Castform Community Day. Now, we had a very similar situation between Clamperl Research Day and Loltad Research Day. Both of them, unlike Phoebus Research Day, had a theme around their whole research task. The tasks had quite a bit of variety to them. And in fact, I think that Loltad Research Day had basically the same type of research task as Clamperl Research Day, with one exception. Instead of it being a water theme, they decided to make it a weather-based theme, but not in the sense that some people were thinking of. You got your typical Minkasaurn type of throws, battling gyms and doing raids, and spinning stops and feeding berries. But when you get to catching, it's a bit more interesting. Some of the tasks involve catching 3 Pokemon with the weather boost. Some of them involve catching 5 Pokemon weather boost. Some of them involve catching a Castform, which may seem odd until you learn that Castform spawns were bumped up during this research day. In addition, they also released the shiny form of Castform into the wild for this event. And maybe well, the overall exception is people got plenty of shiny Castforms and no shiny Loltads. I'll admit I was in the no Loltad camp. And I'll admit I have a little bit of bias that makes me a bit more positive towards this event than other people might be. Because Castform is one of those Pokemon that I just like. Like if I'm doing a top 5% of favorite Pokemon, Castform would be in there somewhere. So of course I'm ecstatic to get a shiny form of Castform, but I can see why a lot of people weren't. Oh, I almost forgot about the real interesting thing that they did for this event. Now up to this point, we were starting to have a trend with new events that they would introduce a new move into the game. So they actually brought that over for this research day. Castform previously couldn't learn his signature move Water Ball, but for this event, they brought Water Ball into the game. And in addition, Pokemon that appeared more often in certain types of weather would be appearing more frequently as well. As for how my personal experiences fit into all this, I was kind of in a situation in between the very first research day and the previous research day when it comes to having access to stops and ability to play overall. Because I was over at PAX East during the time period of this event. So I did have access to some stops, but not nearly as many as I had for the previous community day. So that may have tainted my bias. I think I did somewhere between 10 to 15 research tasks during this community day, and I did not get a shiny Loltad. I did just eventually trade for one. In hindsight, I wonder if it was worth it, but that's not relevant to this case. I'll admit I just thought I got unlucky and assumed that if I were to keep doing research tasks, or was in a situation where I could have done more, I would have gotten my shiny, and that may have been the case, but my bad luck seems to line up with a lot of people's experience with this event. I hear a lot of people saying that they were flooded in shiny Castforms, but didn't get a single Loltad. Which does make sense, because no matter your area, you have more access to catching wild Pokemon than you do research. Because if you're in an area with essentially unlimited Pokestops, you're probably also flooded with spawns. And you also need stuff to catch to do the majority of these research tasks. So it does, even if the shiny rates were the same, it does make sense that the correlation would be people were catching more shiny Castform than they were Loltats. But it definitely seems significantly lower. I don't believe it was as low as Phoebus Community Day, but it was definitely not as high as Clamperl Community Day. So what sort of takeaway can we take from this? First of all, was this event a good event? Personally, I say it was a good event, even though I didn't get shiny. I still enjoyed myself. And did have all the elements to make a good event for people to come together and play. So it definitely still ranks up in comparison with the Clamperl, the Phoebus Community Day. It was definitely better than that. And I guess whether or not it was better than Clamperl Community Day depends on your preference. Obviously, if you're shiny hunting, you would prefer the situation with the Clamperl Community Day over this one. But I think it had the same elements to make it an exciting event. And the new things they tried were interesting. And if the timing was a bit better for all this, maybe I could have got a better assessment about just how good this Community Day research task was. But I'm thankful they at least are keeping up with this style of doing more with the research event rather than just sticking some research tasks on there. I've been all over the place. I haven't even mentioned the best part about research tasks, like the whole concept that makes this potentially better than a Community Day is that you're a lot less limited to the time frame. Yes, you can only get these research tasks for like 3 hours, but if you do manage to pick one up, you don't have to complete it right away. Obviously, you can only hold on to 3 tasks at a time, so you're highly encouraged to do as many as you can in the time frame. But if you just so happen to be in a situation where you can only go out for an hour, for example, or something like that, or you just can't go out at all but are passing through, you can at least clear out your research task and pick up some research tasks for the research day, hold on to them and just do them at your own pace, and that way you're not completely missing out on it. That's probably the most exciting part of a research day. Maybe they could even incorporate some of these elements into Pokemon Go Community Days. But I do also like the way that they're currently doing it, of just changing all the research into stuff that gives you rewards that allow you to catch Pokemon more. Just some food for thought, though. I definitely would see the appeal of making a couple research tasks per area dedicated to just getting the Pokemon that you're hunting for a Community Day. Maybe if you want to be generous, increase the shiny odds there, because they're already super generous during Community Day. But if someone can't really play on Community Day, maybe they could go out, spin a stop, and hope they get the shiny. Or at the very least, they get an extra opportunity at the Pokemon. I don't want to say they should do it that way, though, because there's definitely pros and cons to having all the research tasks give you, Pokeballs and berries to help you catch more Pokemon and get more candy in the time frame, versus giving you the opportunity to take part in Community Day outside of Community Day, without taking away the appeal of the event itself. But man, that's a whole debate for another day. I think I covered all the bases I want to talk about with research days, though. Overall, a very interesting event. Proof that Niantic is still willing to try to innovate, even after establishing things that work. And I'm real excited to see what they do with this concept in the future. There's lots of things hidden between the lines that kind of foreshadow what we'll be seeing in the future. And it excites me to see what direction they tend to take it all in. Of course, I'm almost positive the moment I hit the stop button, I'm going to remember something else I wanted to talk about. But well, all things gotta end somewhere. Thank you all for tuning in for this editorial edition of the Pokemon Go Fireside Chat. I have been your host, Ch.2. If you enjoy what you see, I encourage you to check the show notes and see the other places you can find my work on. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe. All that helps. Like it on whatever audio format you're doing if you can. Reviews are everything as well. And I'm sure if there's anything else I want to plug, I'll either have it at my site, my Twitter, or in the description / show notes of whatever you're listening / watching this on. This is getting a bit elaborate though. Thank you all again, and hope to see you all come in for the next one. Take care.